Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are back with another brand new Schleich release. This is the other, normal addition to their dinosaur line. Like, they've got two kind of fantasy type figures. One is a mammoth, one is a triceratops that are coming out this year, but they're not out quite yet. As far as I know, I haven't been able to find them. But this time we've got the Diplodocus, and boy, oh boy, I don't know what's going on with Schleich this year. Normally, I do quite like their figures, and I usually like that even if they're not scientifically accurate, which they really never are, I still like the stylized look a lot of the time of Schleich figures. But this time, I don't know what's happening with their figures this year. Some, like the Dilophosaurus, was slightly better than I was expecting. The Carcharodontosaurus was 50-50, but this one has got to be the worst figure from Schleich for this year, and there's just something wrong with this one altogether. I don't know. The head sculpt is so unbelievably hideous on this figure. Look at that. I don't know what is happening here with this head sculpt, but it is like the most awkward looking head sculpt for a Diplodocus. Like, it just looks severely depressed and almost looks like his head melted. And obviously it hasn't. He also has paint chips all over his head because for some reason when Schleich shipped this, they literally just threw it in a box and then sent it on its way. They didn't have any sort of protection for it at all. So unfortunately it did receive some paint damage in the shipping process. But starting up here in the head sculpt, again, as we can obviously see, it's really quite ugly. We can see that the mouth is sculpted in a closed position. We can see the nostrils and stuff. The eyes are painted with a black, but as you can see, there we go, my camera would focus, they're kind of over-painted. Like, there's more paintwork in that area than there really should be. The one thing I do like about the majority of the figure is the paintwork. I think the colors on it look pretty good. The very nice greenish tones that we have, as well as the dark wash that's present, which kind of ties everything together. We also have a lighter green showing up, and then a lighter tone, even more so of a lighter tone on the underside. That's one thing they did do right for this figure, and that is the paintwork. Well, most of it. You can see we've got some random, hanging skin here in the throat, which I feel like is kind of a random addition to the figure. Moving down along the back of the neck, you can see a line of ridges following down, something we usually see on Diplodocus. We can see the skin texture as well. Looks okay, but it's not anything overly impressive. It just looks decent for what it is, but the dark wash definitely is amping up the detail and making all of the detail pop on the figure in a really nice way. And again, the greenish tones look really good. I actually think that they're very nice naturalistic tones of color. I think this figure must have been sculpted by a different sculptor than the one that we had seen do I think it was a Brontosaurus a few years back, who also most definitely sculpted out the Carcharodontosaurus from this year, because you could just see there's a very different style to the way that they're sculpted between those two different sculptors. At least it seems like it to me. This one, again, just has a little bit better of a look in certain areas. Oh, maybe it was him, actually, because this whole area here kind of looks like the type of sculpt I would see from that sculptor. There's just something with that sculptor that the legs and stuff always look awkward on their figures. But as you move down, you can see we do pick up kind of like a yellowish tone that follows along the spinal column and also stripes down into the body. I think it looks okay, but it's not perfect as far as its application. I don't know, they just did a really poor job of applying the patterning, and didn't really make it look like naturalistic coloration. Some areas look okay, like right here looks alright. I think that looks pretty nice, but as you move back here, you can very clearly see how cheap looking that application of the paint is. It's very watered down paint. You can see more of the paint following along the ridges right here, in between the ridges, but then it becomes super watered down as you move out into the side, and it just looks kind of ugly for the most part over in that area. But as you move down into the body, you can make out the shoulder blade and stuff right there. We can also see the lighter green tones, basically running down under these darker green tones. And then the fairly smooth and natural transition down to the off-white of the underbelly. I can see more paint scuffs and stuff on this one. I'm going to have to touch this one up just to see if I can, get the paint back to looking kind of okay. But as you move down into the front leg, my camera refuses to focus. There we go. You can see again, the detail looks alright. Doesn't look great, but it looks okay. Like, you can see some skin wrinkles and folds and stuff, and as you lead down into the foot sculpt, you can see the foot sculpt and the extremely over-painted nails that we have here for the Diplodocus. It's also definitely not what I would expect to see when it comes to the nails of a Diplodocus. It just looks very, very wrong to me, but it's hard to tell, honestly, what they were going for because there's so much of that dark paint in that area that it's hard to really decipher what they were going for here as far as, like, you know, if they really should have painted those areas. It kind of looks like maybe it was meant to look sort of like it should, but then they just kind of painted over it, and it doesn't look like they have the big nail kind of looks like maybe that's supposed to be the nail coming out of the side. I don't know. It's just a little bit of a jumbled mess down there in the foot sculpt of the Diplodocus. As you move up into the stomach, you can see a little bit of girth right there, making it look like it's a fairly well-fed sauropod. Moving back into the rear leg, we can kind of make out the hip bone, but not too obviously. The muscle definition isn't overly defined, which I kind of like, actually. As you move down, you could sort of make out the knee in the front of the leg and stuff. You can see, again, there's not much in the way of, like, skin wrinkling or folding or anything on this figure, so you know, it's really not as highly detailed as it could be, but it looks okay. As you move down into the foot sculpt, though, the rear foot sculpt looks absolutely horrible. Like, it's hard to get in there, but for some reason, like, you can see the paintwork is very inconsistent on the nails. We've got just way too much paint for the nails on these figures lately when it comes to Schleich, especially on this one. I don't know if we can get a better shot. It's hard to get in there. No, not really. We've got big, bulky, curved nails and stuff on this figure as well. So again, definitely some very, very poor areas on this figure. Another thing that I really don't like is something you may be able to see right now is the fact that the tail is sculpted in a way where it actually swings around like really sharply to the point where it looks like it's broken and is actually attached to the legs. So you can't even bring that out. You know, it's stuck there, which is, again, very, very strange. I guess that's just an attempt so that this makes, you know, room for the Diplodocus on, like, shelves and stuff on store shelves, and this long tail doesn't become an inconvenience, but I think that as well takes away from the figure. But as you move up here, again, following along the back, we see that sloppy patterning moving down. We can see more of the ridges following along the spinal column, and again, some more okay-looking detail as we move out, some more okay looking paintwork again as we move out as well. We can see the ridges again kind of taper off as we lead back around, and then obviously this very awkward area of the tail where it looks like it's just like severely broken for some reason. Moving along the underside, you can see this area looks pretty decent. I think the skin texture looks nice down here, and we also have some nice paintwork with that light tone, and the wash definitely highlighting all of the detail quite nicely through the underside of our Diplodocus. And then when we turn the figure around, we can see again the goofy looking head, but we can see that it is now facing away from us, the head that is. And as we move down, we've got the same type of paintwork and stuff. Honestly, I feel like the paint of this one would have been perfectly fine if we just excluded this patterning. I feel like the patterning actually kind of takes away from the figure, and it would have looked totally fine and actually more realistic if we didn't have that patterning moving along the back of the body. But as we move down, we can see the biggest difference here is the positioning of the legs on this side. We can kind of see how they're kind of scrunching up the belly right there a little bit. We also can see this annoying tag that's in my way, and I did not take it off quite yet, so I guess I'm going to. Sometimes I keep those on, sometimes I take them off. We're just taking it off of this one. This is obviously not going to be any sort of a classic figure from Schleich. But as you move down into the foot sculpt over here, again, my camera just really doesn't want to focus on it. I don't know if maybe it's because it's too ugly, but you can see a massive amount of paintwork on the foot down here. Again, just covering the entire bottom of the foot in a really poor way. As we move back up again, you can see the detailing through the course of the legs. Looks okay, but obviously we can see that it's walking, and we very much so can take note to that with the positioning of this leg as it's picking up and taking a step. And that's pretty much the biggest difference you'll see from one side to the other. Obviously, this thing was really beat up on the way. We've got another paint scuff out here. Definitely quite a few paint scuffs on the figure overall just from shipping it. But I felt like this figure really did have some potential. Like, you know, Schleich obviously is never the greatest dinosaur producing company in the world, but they have produced some, honestly, classics over the years. Especially, you know, a few years back, they used to be producing some pretty cool stuff, but it seems like they're really kind of dropping off now. Like, even more so than they were. I know a lot of people look at Schleich as almost a joke, but I've always really enjoyed their figures. They just have such a charm to them, but this last round of figures have not been their best work, and I would say the Carcharodontosaurus is actually a pretty decent figure. Like, it's not bad. The Dilophosaurus, again, better than I expected, but this one is rough. This is absolutely the worst figure of the year from them. It may be the worst figure of, well, actually, I don't know about that, but it's one of the worst figures that they've produced in quite some time. I can't go ahead and say that with the Morose still out there. But for a length, you can see about 11 inches or around 28 centimeters. And then for a height, right around 3 inches, maybe slightly over, or about 8 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, Robert Muldoon, and the Collect Day Human Being next to our Schleich Diplodocus, and you can see that it's fairly small when it comes to Diplodocus figures. A lot of the time when you get a sauropod like this, it ends up being significantly larger, but obviously Schleich chose to go the smaller route this time around. And when we take a look at it next to a way more impressive and way better looking Diplodocus, you can see here with the Eofauna version that, again, the size is really quite drastically different. And you're going to continue to see that as you move through other Diplodocus figures, as we have the older Safari Ltd version, which we can see again just completely outsizes the Schleich release. And as you continue to move through different companies' Diplodocus releases, we'll just see it probably get worse and worse as we have the Rebor version here, which again, absolutely a lot larger. And that continues on down the line, even toward the Invicta Diplodocus, which we can see again is still quite a bit larger than the Schleich version. So hopefully this gives you a pretty good idea of the fact that this release here, this Schleich Diplodocus, is quite small. So this brand new Schleich Diplodocus figure is something, I'll tell you that much. It's definitely something, but I don't know what. It's absolutely, in my opinion anyway, and now I haven't seen the fantasy style figures quite yet, but I can't see those things being too terrible. But it's absolutely the worst release from Schleich for this year, if you ask me, which is unfortunate because I still was kind of holding out hope that this would be the best one. You know, the original promo images we had weren't really the greatest angles, so it's, you know, kind of tough to tell from that angle if the figure looked good or not. Having it now here in person, I can tell you it definitely doesn't look that great. Some areas I feel like look a little better than some of the others, like the fine detail and the, you know, the fact that it doesn't look quite so awkward in the body, I feel like kind of makes this one look a little bit nicer in some aspects than some of the other figures. Like, it just doesn't have the awkwardness that some of the other ones do, but that head sculpt is absolutely atrocious. I cannot even deal with looking at that head sculpt, and the paintwork in some areas is really nice. Like, I love the greenish tones that we have on this, and I think it could have looked really, really good, but the yellow paint moving along the back is just so sloppily and unnaturally applied, so I'm not really a big fan of that. I do like the wash, the dark wash that they've applied. I think works perfectly on the figure and is exactly what they should apply to their sauropods, so that's a plus. But I'm also not a big fan of the fact that the tail is bent so sharply kind of up around the side of the figure and then attached to the legs. I just feel like that as well takes away from the Diplodocus. So this one's really quite the roller coaster, honestly. It's got ups and downs all over the place, and again, in my opinion, sits itself in the position as the worst release from Schleich for this year, which is unfortunate. It's definitely not the worst Schleich release ever, though. I mean, the Morose, I think, will keep that one intact, but it's definitely not a great figure, and unfortunately, in my opinion, is a pretty big letdown. Again, it's got some decent areas to it, but overall, it's just not a very good Diplodocus. If you are interested in picking this one up, though, I will include a link in the description to where you can from the Schleich website. So make sure you check that link, grab it if you want it, and like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.